The gunshot that killed Penelope Owens's husband wasn't meant for him, but it put her 6 feet deep in debt, all the same. She stood in the dust-choked main street of San Elizario, Texas, in the summer of 1878, staring at the notice nailed to the door of what used to be her general store, her hands trembling as she read the foreclosure warning for the third time. The bank wanted payment in full within 30 days, or everything she and Thomas had built over 5 years of marriage would belong to someone else. The worst part wasn't losing the store or the small house behind it. The worst part was knowing that Thomas had died trying to break up a saloon fight that had nothing to do with him, leaving her with his debts and his kindness and absolutely nothing else. She pulled the notice down, crumpling it in her fist as the late afternoon sun beat mercilessly against her back. San Elizario sat just north of the Rio Grande, a town that had seen better days before the Salt Wars had torn through a year prior. The tension between Mexican and Anglo settlers still simmered beneath every interaction, and Penelope had learned to navigate those waters carefully. Her store had served everyone equally, which made her popular with some and suspicious to others. Now none of that mattered. In 30 days, she would have nothing. Mrs. Owens. The voice came from behind her, deep and measured. She turned to find a man she had seen around town but never spoken to directly. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of winter grass. He wore a dusty brown hat, a simple work shirt, and pants that had seen honest labor. His boots were scuffed but well-maintained. Everything about him suggested a man who worked with his hands and didn't waste time on pleasantries. Yes. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, suddenly aware of how she must look. She had been scrubbing floors all morning, and her dress was still damp with sweat and cleaning water. Name's August Quinlan. I own the ranch about 5 miles west of here. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that needed cutting. I heard about your situation. Of course he had. In a town of barely 300 souls, everyone knew everyone else's business. She lifted her chin, preparing for whatever came next. Charity. A lecture about proper womanly behavior. An offer of employment that came with implications she wouldn't accept. I appreciate your concern, Mr. Quinlan, but I'll manage. The lie tasted bitter, but pride was about all she had left. I'm not here to offer concern. He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. I'm here to offer a solution. She waited, her fingers still clenched around the crumpled notice. I need a wife, he said bluntly. You need financial security. I'm proposing a business arrangement. The words hit her like a physical blow. She had heard of such things, of course. Mail-order brides, arrangements of convenience, but she had never imagined herself in such a position. Mr. Quinlan, I buried my husband 3 months ago. I know, and I'm not asking you to love me. His gaze was steady, unflinching. I'm asking you to marry me so I can pay off your debts and give you a place to live. In return, you'd run my household. Cook, clean, manage the domestic side of the ranch. I've been doing it myself for 2 years since my mother passed, and I'm not good at it. That's all. She couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. That's all. He paused. I won't lie to you, Mrs. Owens. I could use the help. The ranch is doing well enough, but I'm working myself into the ground trying to manage everything alone. I've got 2 hired hands, but they're cowboys, not housekeepers. I need someone who can make the place feel less like a work camp and more like a home. And you want nothing else from me? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. I want a clean house and decent meals. He met her eyes directly. I won't force anything else on you. You'd have your own room. We'd be married in name for legal purposes, but that's where it ends unless you decide otherwise. Penelope studied him carefully. August Quinlan had a reputation in San Elizario as a fair man, if a solitary one. He paid his bills on time, treated his workers well, and kept to himself. She had never heard whispers about him frequenting the saloons or keeping company with the women who worked there. He seemed exactly what he presented himself to be, a rancher who needed help and was willing to enter a practical arrangement to get it. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you're capable. You ran that store efficiently, kept good books, treated people fairly. Because you're in a bad situation through no fault of your own, and because I figure you're smart enough to know a reasonable offer when you hear one." It was reasonable, coldly, practically reasonable. It was also her only option, unless she wanted to leave San Elizario with nothing but the clothes on her back and hope for kindness from strangers in some other town. "I need time to think about it," she said. "You've got until tomorrow evening. That's when I head back to the ranch. If you decide yes, meet me at the church at 4 o'clock. If you don't show, I'll understand and you won't hear from me again." He placed his hat back on his head, nodded once, and walked away, his stride long and purposeful. Penelope stood in the street long after he had disappeared, the crumpled notice still clutched in her hand. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the adobe buildings in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. A woman called her children inside for supper. Life continued around her while she stood frozen, faced with an impossible choice that was really no choice at all. That night, she barely slept. She lay in the narrow bed she had once shared with Thomas, staring at the ceiling and trying to imagine what her life would become. Thomas had been sweet, gentle, always thoughtful. He had courted her properly in Missouri before they married and headed west to seek their fortune. He had made her laugh. He had held her when she cried after their baby was stillborn 2 years into their marriage. He had been everything a husband should be. August Quinlan was offering her nothing of that. He was offering a roof, a job, and legal protection. He was offering survival. By morning, she had made her decision. She spent the day settling what little affairs she could. She sold what remained in the store to a merchant from El Paso who happened to be passing through. It barely made a dent in what she owed, but it was something. She packed her belongings into 2 worn carpetbags. She wrote a letter to her sister back in Missouri, explaining as much as she could without revealing how desperate things had truly become. At 3:30 the following afternoon, she put on her best dress, a simple gray cotton that had been her Sunday dress before Thomas died. She pinned her dark hair up carefully, put on her bonnet, and picked up her bags. She didn't look back at the little house as she walked away. Father Miguel was waiting at the small Catholic church when she arrived, his kind face creased with concern. August Quinlan stood beside him, wearing what was clearly his best shirt and a clean pair of pants. He had shaved and combed his hair. When he saw her approaching, something flickered across his face too quickly for her to identify. "Mrs. Owens," he said quietly. "Mr. Quinlan." She set down her bags. "I'm here. I'm glad." He turned to Father Miguel. "We're ready if you are." The ceremony was brief, almost perfunctory. Father Miguel tried to inject some warmth into it, but there was no disguising what this was. A transaction. Penelope spoke her vows in a steady voice, refusing to let it shake. August's voice was firm, clear. When Father Miguel pronounced them married, August didn't kiss her. He simply nodded, thanked the priest, and picked up her bags. "I've got a wagon outside," he said. "It's about an hour's ride to the ranch." She followed him out into the late afternoon heat. The wagon was sturdy, pulled by 2 strong horses. He helped her up onto the bench, his hands careful and impersonal, then climbed up beside her. They left San Elizario in silence, the town falling away behind them as they headed west into open country. The landscape was harsh and beautiful in equal measure. Low scrub brush stretched in every direction, broken occasionally by rocky outcroppings and shallow arroyos. Mountains rose in the distance, purple in the fading light. The sky seemed impossibly vast, a dome of deepening blue that made Penelope feel very small. "It's different from Missouri," August said after a long silence. "Yes." She kept her eyes on the horizon. "Thomas and I came out here because he wanted adventure. He wanted to build something new." "Did you want that too?" She considered the question honestly. "I wanted to be with him. Where we lived mattered less than being together." August nodded but didn't respond. They rode on in silence until the ranch came into view. It was larger than she had expected. A main house, solidly built from adobe and wood, with a covered porch that wrapped around two sides. A barn, a bunkhouse, several corrals, and various outbuildings spread across the property. Cattle dotted the surrounding grassland, moving slowly in the cooling evening air. "It's not fancy," August said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it's sound." "It looks well maintained," she offered. He drove the wagon up to the house and helped her down. Two men emerged from the bunkhouse, both watching with undisguised curiosity. August waved them over. "This is my wife, Penelope," he said simply. "Penelope, this is Jack and Sam. They work the cattle and handle most of the outdoor work." Jack was older, weathered, with a gray mustache and sharp blue eyes. Sam was younger, probably no more than 25, with an easy smile. Both removed their hats and nodded respectfully. "Madam," Jack said. "Welcome." "Thank you." She managed a small smile. "I'll show you the house," August said, picking up her bags again. The two ranch hands drifted back toward the bunkhouse, and she followed August inside. The interior was clean but Spartan. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large fireplace, a sturdy table, and a few chairs. Doors led off to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything was neat, but there was no softness to it. No curtains, no rugs, no personal touches that made a space feel lived in. "Your room is here." August opened a door to reveal a small bedroom with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a washstand. "I'm across the hall. There's a third bedroom we use for storage. The privy is out back. We've got a good well, so water isn't a problem." She set her bags on the bed, looking around the bare room. "I know it's not much," he said from the doorway. "It's fine." She turned to face him. "What do you need me to do first?" He looked surprised by the question. "Nothing tonight. You must be tired. I'll make supper." "You hired me to cook and keep house," she said firmly. "I might as well start now. Show me the kitchen." Something that might have been respect crossed his face. "All right." He showed her where things were kept, apologizing for the limited supplies. She found flour, beans, some dried beef, onions, and a few other staples. It was enough to work with. While August went out to check on the animals, she rolled up her sleeves and got to work. An hour later, she called him in for supper. She had made a simple stew and biscuits, nothing fancy, but it was hot and filling. August ate with the focused attention of a man who wasn't used to regular, well-prepared meals. "This is good," he said after his second helping. "Really good." "Thank you." She picked at her own food, her appetite still suppressed by the strangeness of everything. They cleaned up together in silence. When the dishes were done, August cleared his throat awkwardly. "I usually turn in early," he said. "Sunrise comes quick, but you do whatever suits you." "I'll retire as well." She dried her hands on the towel. "Good night, Mr. Quinlan. You can call me August. We're married after all. Then you should call me Penelope," he nodded. "Good night, Penelope." She closed herself into the small bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her dress, still feeling like she was living someone else's life. She had married a stranger today. She had moved to a ranch in the middle of nowhere. She had traded one uncertain future for another, only marginally more secure. But at least she had a roof over her head. At least the bank couldn't take anything from her now. She finally changed into her nightgown and lay down, exhaustion pulling her under despite the unfamiliar surroundings. Tomorrow she would figure out how to navigate this strange new existence. Tonight, she would simply survive it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Penelope woke before dawn, started the fire, and made breakfast. August ate quickly and headed out to work the ranch with Jack and Sam. She spent her days cleaning, organizing, and trying to impose some order on a house that had been neglected for too long. She found mouse droppings in the pantry, dust an inch thick in corners, and windows so dirty they barely let in light. She attacked each problem methodically. She scrubbed and swept and organized. She made lists of what was needed and presented them to August at supper each night. He listened carefully and never questioned her requests. Within a week, she had fabric for curtains, rugs for the floors, and supplies to make the house more livable. August was true to his word. He didn't intrude on her space or make demands beyond the work they had agreed upon. He was polite, almost formal in their interactions. He thanked her for meals, complimented improvements she made to the house, and otherwise kept to himself. When he wasn't working, he sat on the porch reading books about cattle management or whittling small figures from scraps of wood. She learned his patterns. He liked his coffee strong and black. He preferred beef to chicken, corn to beans. He was neat in his personal habits, always washing up before coming to the table. He had a small scar above his left eyebrow that he never explained. He sometimes hummed while he worked, tuneless but oddly comforting. A month passed. Then two. Penelope found herself settling into the life of the ranch in ways she hadn't expected. She started a small garden near the house, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn soil. She mended clothes for August and the ranch hands. She learned to make soap and candles. She began to understand the rhythm of ranch life, the cycle of seasons and needs that governed everything. She also began to notice August in ways she hadn't at first. The way he was unfailingly gentle with the horses, talking to them in a low voice while he worked. The way he split extra firewood without being asked when he knew she was doing laundry. The way he always made sure she had what she needed before spending money on himself. One evening in late October, a storm rolled in from the west, bringing the first real cold of the approaching winter. The wind howled around the house, and rain lashed against the windows. Penelope had made a hearty stew for supper, and August lingered at the table after eating, seeming reluctant to face the weather outside. "Jack and Sam are secure in the bunkhouse," he said, more to fill the silence than anything. "Cattle are in the near pastures, nothing to do but wait it out." "It's a fierce storm," she agreed, pouring them both more coffee. "Reminds me of the storms we'd get in Colorado," he said. "That's where I grew up. My father had a ranch up in the high country, beautiful but brutal. It was the most personal information he had ever volunteered. Why did you leave? He died when I was 19. Left the ranch to my older brother. I got a small inheritance and headed south, looking for land I could afford." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Found this place about 6 years ago. It was in bad shape, but I could see the potential." "You've built it into something impressive," she said honestly. "I've worked hard." He met her eyes across the table. "But it's better now, since you came. It feels less like I'm just surviving and more like I'm actually living." The words hung between them, more intimate than anything that had passed before. Penelope felt her breath catch slightly. "I'm glad I could help." "You've done more than help." He hesitated, then continued. "I know this wasn't what you wanted. I know you married me because you had no choice. But I want you to know that I'm grateful. You've made this house a home again." She looked down at her own cup, feeling something shift inside her. It hasn't been as difficult as I feared. No, no, she looked back up at him. You've been kind, fair. You've treated me with respect. That's more than many women in my situation could hope for. You deserve respect, he said quietly. You deserve a lot more than this arrangement gave you. The storm raged outside, but inside the small kitchen, the air felt charged with something entirely different. Penelope was acutely aware of August sitting across from her, of the firelight playing across his face, of the way he was looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. I should check the barn, he said abruptly, standing. Make sure everything's secured. In this weather, she stood as well. August, you'll be soaked. I've been wetter. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door. Won't be long. He disappeared into the storm, leaving Penelope alone with her whirling thoughts. She cleaned up from supper slowly, trying to understand what had just happened. There had been something in his voice, in his eyes, that suggested their arrangement was becoming more complicated than either of them had planned. When August returned 20 minutes later, he was indeed soaked through, his hair plastered to his head and water dripping from his clothes. Penelope had already pulled out towels and set them by the fire. Everything's fine, he reported, shivering slightly, but I'm wet as a drowned rat. Get those wet things off before you catch your death, she said, handing him the towels. I'll heat some water for tea. He disappeared into his room and emerged a few minutes later in dry clothes, his hair roughly toweled. She handed him a steaming cup, and they stood together by the fire, listening to the storm. Penelope, he said softly. Yes. If you ever want to leave, if this life isn't what you want, I'll help you. I'll make sure you have enough money to start over somewhere else. You're not trapped here. She turned to look at him, surprised. Why would you say that? Because I want you to know you have a choice. You didn't have one when you married me, but you have one now. She considered his words carefully. What if I don't want to leave? Something flickered in his eyes, hope mixed with caution. Then I'd be glad, more than glad. I'm not unhappy here, she said slowly, testing the words as she spoke them. When I first came, I thought I would just be enduring, surviving, but it's become more than that. I like the work, I like the ranch, I like the life we've built here. And what about me? The question was barely above a whisper. Can you tolerate me? She almost smiled. I more than tolerate you, August Quinlan. He set down his cup and turned to face her fully. I need to tell you something. I need to be honest. Her heart began to beat faster. What is it? I didn't ask you to marry me just because I needed help around the house. I mean, I did need help, that was true. But I had noticed you before, around town. The way you treated people. The way you held your head up even when things were difficult. I thought you were remarkable. When Thomas died, I wanted to help you, but I didn't know how without insulting you. The marriage seemed like a way to give you what you needed while getting what I wanted. And what did you want? She asked, though she thought she knew the answer. A chance, he said simply. A chance to see if maybe, someday, you might feel something more than just obligation toward me. I know I said this was purely business, and I meant that. I wasn't going to force anything on you. But I hoped that maybe, given time, you might come to care for me. Penelope felt tears prick her eyes, though she couldn't have said if they were sad tears or something else entirely. August, I married you thinking I would never feel anything like love again. Thomas was my great love, or so I thought. I buried my heart with him. His face fell and he started to turn away, but she caught his arm. Let me finish, she said gently. I thought I had buried my heart, but these past months you've been slowly bringing it back to life. Your kindness, your patience, the way you've never asked for more than I could give. The way you work so hard to provide for all of us. The way you hum when you think no one's listening. I've fallen in love with you, August Quinlan, and it terrifies me. He stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and joy. "You have?" "I have," she confirmed, her voice trembling. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it was gradual, a little bit each day. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being the man I married out of desperation and became the man I can't imagine living without." August reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he cupped her face gently in his rough, work-worn hands. "Can I kiss you, please?" she whispered. The kiss was tentative at first, almost shy, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then it deepened, became more certain, more real. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the day I first saw you," August admitted, resting his forehead against hers. "You were sweeping the porch of the store, and the sun was in your hair, and I thought you were the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen." "You should have said something sooner," she said, smiling through the tears that were now definitely happy ones. "I made you a promise. I wasn't going to break it. Then I'm releasing you from it," she said firmly. "This is a real marriage now, August, if you want it to be." "I want it to be," he said fervently. "God, Penelope, I want it more than anything." That night, for the first time, Penelope didn't sleep in the small bedroom that had been hers alone. She fell asleep in August's arms, in the larger bedroom across the hall, feeling safe and cherished and more at peace than she had in years. The storm raged outside, but inside, everything was finally calm. The next morning she woke before dawn as usual, but this time she woke pressed against August's warm body, his arm draped over her waist. She lay still for a moment, marveling at how right it felt. This was different from what she had shared with Thomas. That had been sweet, innocent, the love of youth. This was deeper, built on respect and understanding and genuine appreciation for who they each were. August stirred, then woke fully. When he saw her watching him, he smiled. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband. I could get used to waking up like this," he murmured, pulling her closer. "You'd better," she said, kissing him softly, "because I'm not going anywhere." They eventually rose and went about their morning routine, but everything felt different now. The touches were more frequent, more affectionate. The conversation flowed more easily. When August headed out to work, he kissed her goodbye at the door, something that made both Jack and Sam do double takes when they saw it. "About time," Jack muttered to Sam, loud enough for Penelope to hear. Figured they'd work it out eventually. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Penelope's life. She and August learned each other in new ways, discovering preferences and quirks and building a genuine partnership. They talked late into the night about everything and nothing. They made plans for the ranch, for the future. They laughed together, worked together, and loved together. Winter arrived in earnest, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Penelope made the house as cozy as possible, and August made sure they had plenty of firewood and supplies. On the coldest nights, they huddled together by the fire, August reading aloud while Penelope mended or knitted. One evening in mid-December, August came in from the cold looking troubled. Penelope knew him well enough now to recognize when something was bothering him. "What is it?" she asked, handing him a cup of hot coffee. "Ran into the sheriff in town today," August said, sitting heavily at the table. "There's been trouble with rustlers hitting some of the smaller ranches. 3 have been hit in the past month, lost significant numbers of cattle. Are we at risk?" "Maybe. We're not a huge operation, but we're doing well enough to be a target." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I'm going to have Jack and Sam start doing night patrols, and I'll take some shifts too. I don't want to lose what we've worked so hard to build. What can I do to help?" He looked at her with affection. "Keep the house running. Keep being exactly who you are. That's help enough." But Penelope wasn't satisfied with that answer. Over the next few days, she thought about the problem. The rustlers were hitting at night, taking advantage of the darkness and the scattered nature of the ranches in the area. What they needed was a way to see them coming. She remembered something Thomas had told her years ago about how some ranches kept dogs not just for herding but for guarding. She mentioned it to August at supper. "Dogs could alert us if strangers came around at night," she suggested. "Give us warning." August considered it. "That's not a bad idea. I know a rancher up north who breeds good working dogs. I could ride up there, see if he has any to spare." "Take Sam with you," Penelope said. "I don't like the idea of you traveling alone with rustlers about." He smiled at her concern. "Yes, madam." 2 days later, August and Sam rode north, leaving Jack to watch the ranch and Penelope. She spent the time making preparations for Christmas, which was only a few weeks away. She baked bread and made preserves, sewed new shirts for August and the hands, and planned a special meal for the holiday. August returned after 3 days with Sam and 2 dogs, a male and a female, both young but already well trained. They were mixed breeds, large and alert with intelligent eyes. "Meet Duke and Duchess," August said, introducing them. The dogs sniffed Penelope cautiously, then seemed to accept her, their tails wagging. "They're wonderful," she said, scratching Duke behind the ears. "What do they do?" "They're trained to patrol and alert," August explained. "They'll bark if anyone unfamiliar comes onto the property. And they're loyal. Once they bond with us, they'll protect us with their lives." The dogs proved their worth almost immediately. They settled into the ranch routine, following August during the day and patrolling at night. Their presence alone seemed to make everyone feel more secure. Christmas arrived with unseasonably mild weather. Penelope prepared a feast with the supplies she had been hoarding. Roasted chicken, vegetables from her preserved stores, fresh bread, and a pie made from dried apples. She decorated the main room with pine boughs and candles, making everything festive. They invited Jack and Sam to eat with them, and the 4 of them shared a surprisingly jolly evening. Jack told stories from his cowboy days, making them all laugh. Sam played the harmonica, filling the house with music. August presented Penelope with a gift he had been working on in secret, a beautiful wooden box, inlaid with different types of wood in an intricate pattern. "For your sewing things," he said shyly. "I know you've been keeping them in that old basket. August, it's beautiful." She ran her fingers over the smooth surface. "You made this, been working on it for a while, wanted it to be special." She kissed him in front of the ranch hands, not caring who saw. "It is special, thank you." She gave him a new warm coat she had sewn in secret, lined with fur she had traded for in town. His old one was falling apart, and she had worried about him being out in the cold. "Penelope, this must have cost a fortune," he said, running his hands over the quality fabric. "It costs time," she corrected, "and you're worth every minute." After Jack and Sam left for the bunkhouse, August pulled her close by the fire. "This is the best Christmas I've had in years, maybe ever." "Mine too," she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I could be this happy again." "I love you," he said, the words still somewhat new but growing more natural each time he said them. "I love you so much, Penelope. I love you too." The new year arrived, bringing 1879 with cold clarity. The rustlers struck one more ranch in late January, but August's precautions paid off. When suspicious riders approached the Quinlan ranch one night, Duke and Duchess raised such a ruckus that August, Jack, and Sam were alerted immediately. They fired warning shots, and the would-be rustlers fled without taking any cattle. The sheriff organized a posse after that, and they managed to track down the rustling gang. 3 men were arrested and taken to El Paso for trial. The threat ended as quickly as it had begun, leaving the ranchers breathing easier. As winter turned to spring, Penelope noticed changes in herself. She was tired more often, queasy in the mornings, and certain smells that had never bothered her before suddenly made her ill. She suspected the reason, but said nothing to August until she was sure. When she finally told him one evening in late March, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He stared at her for a long moment, then swept her up in his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. "A baby," he kept saying. "We're having a baby." "Careful," she said, still laughing. "You'll make me dizzy." He set her down gently, immediately solicitous. "Are you all right? Do you need to sit? Should you be working so hard?" "August, I'm pregnant, not fragile." Women have been having babies while running households since the dawn of time. But he fussed over her anyway, and she found she didn't mind. He took over the heavier chores without being asked, made sure she had whatever food she could tolerate during her morning sickness, and generally treated her like she was made of spun glass. The pregnancy progressed normally. As spring became summer, Penelope's belly swelled. August talked to it sometimes when he thought she was asleep, telling their unborn child about the ranch and the life they would have together. In early October, when the heat was finally breaking and the air was turning crisp again, Penelope went into labor. August sent Sam riding hard for the midwife in San Elizario, then paced frantically while Jack tried to calm him down. "Women have been doing this since Eve," Jack pointed out. "She'll be fine." "You don't know that," August snapped, then immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, I'm just worried." "I know, boss, but your wife is strong. She'll come through this." The midwife arrived, a capable woman named Rosa who had delivered half the babies in the area. She shooed August out of the bedroom and got to work. The labor was long and difficult, and August wore a path in the floorboards with his pacing. Finally, just as dawn was breaking, he heard the cry of a newborn. He froze, his heart pounding. Rosa appeared in the doorway, smiling. "You have a son," she announced, "and your wife is tired but well. Come meet your boy." August entered the bedroom on shaking legs. Penelope lay in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "We have a son," she said softly. August approached carefully and looked down at the tiny red face of his child. The baby was perfect, with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. Something in August's chest cracked open, flooding him with love so intense it was almost painful. "Can I hold him?" he asked. Penelope carefully transferred the baby to his arms. August cradled his son with infinite gentleness, marveling at how small he was, how perfect. "What should we name him?" Penelope asked. They had discussed names but hadn't settled on anything. August looked down at his son, then out the window at the rising sun. "What about Samuel? We could call him Sam, but not after our Sam. After the new beginning he represents." "Samuel Quinlan," Penelope said, trying it out. "I like it, but we'll call him Samuel, not Sam, to avoid confusion." "Samuel it is." August gently returned the baby to Penelope's arms, then kissed her forehead. Thank you for him, for everything, for giving me a family I never thought I'd have." "We're both lucky," she said, smiling up at him. "We found each other when we both needed it most." The first year of Samuel's life was exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. He was a good baby, healthy and happy, with his father's green eyes and his mother's dark hair. August proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to help with feedings, carrying Samuel around while he did chores, talking to him constantly, even though the baby couldn't possibly understand. Penelope watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love. August had always been good and kind, but fatherhood revealed a tenderness in him that took her breath away. He was gentle but playful, protective but not smothering. He was everything a father should be. The ranch continued to prosper. August made some smart investments, bought more cattle, and expanded their grazing land. They hired another ranch hand, a young Mexican man named Miguel who worked hard and fit in well with Jack and Sam. When Samuel was 2 years old, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and August was less frantic, though no less attentive. In the summer of 1882, they welcomed a daughter they named Rose, after August's mother. Rose was tiny and fierce from the moment she was born, with lungs that could wake the dead and a temper to match. She had August's coloring but Penelope's features, a striking combination that August predicted would cause him trouble when she was older. "I'll have to beat the boys off with a stick," he said, watching Rose sleep in her cradle. "She's barely a month old," Penelope laughed. "Let's worry about that in about 16 years. Their family complete, they settled into a comfortable rhythm. Samuel grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, asking endless questions and trying to help with ranch work. Rose was more independent, content to play on her own and explore everything she could reach. The years passed in a blur of hard work, love, and laughter. The ranch grew more successful with each season. August bought out a neighboring property when the owner retired, nearly doubling their land. They built additions onto the house, creating more bedrooms and a proper parlor. They replaced old equipment and improved the barn. Through it all, their love for each other only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course. August could be stubborn, and Penelope had a temper when pushed too far. But they learned to talk through their problems, to listen to each other, to compromise when necessary and stand firm when it mattered. One evening in the fall of 1885, Penelope stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Samuel, now 6, was helping August mend a fence near the house. Rose, 3 years old, played at Penelope's feet with a wooden doll August had carved for her. Duke and Duchess, older now but still alert, dozed in the yard. August finished with the fence and walked over, ruffling Samuel's hair before joining Penelope on the porch. He slipped an arm around her waist and she leaned into him, perfectly comfortable. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how far we've come," she said. 7 years ago, I stood in the street in San Elizario, convinced my life was over. I thought the best I could hope for was survival. And now I have everything I ever wanted and things I didn't even know to want." She turned to look at him. "I have a home, a family, a purpose. I have love, real, deep, lasting love." "I remember the day I asked you to marry me," August said. "I was so nervous. I thought you'd refuse, thought you'd be insulted by the proposition." "I almost did refuse," she admitted. "It seemed so cold, so transactional. I couldn't imagine it working." "What changed your mind?" "Desperation at first," she said honestly, "but also something in your eyes. You were offering me a business arrangement, but there was something else there, something that suggested you saw me as more than just a housekeeper for hire." August pulled her closer. "I saw you as someone remarkable who deserved better than what life had handed her. I wanted to help and I wanted a chance. I'm so grateful you took that chance on me." "Best decision I ever made," she said, kissing him softly. Samuel looked up from his play and made a face. "Papa and Mama are kissing again," he announced to Rose, who giggled. "Come here, you two," August called, laughing. Samuel and Rose ran over and August scooped them both up, one in each arm. "You know what? I think we need a family hug." They stood there on the porch, the 4 of them wrapped in each other's arms, while the sun sank below the horizon and the first stars began to appear. The dogs wandered over and sat nearby, as if wanting to be part of the moment. In the distance, cattle lowed peacefully. This was everything Penelope had never dared to dream of. She had expected strings and conditions when she married August. She had expected to spend her life repaying a debt, living with a man who had bought her services. Instead, August had handed her the deed to his heart and walked away, giving her the freedom to choose him not out of obligation but out of love. She had chosen him. Every day, she continued to choose him, and he chose her right back. The following years brought their share of challenges, as all years do. There were droughts that tested their resources, harsh winters that pushed them to their limits, and the normal trials of raising children and running a ranch. But they faced everything together, their partnership unshakable. In 1887, when Samuel was 8 and Rose was 5, they faced their most serious challenge yet. August was thrown from a horse while breaking in a new stallion. The fall broke his leg badly, and for weeks he was bedridden, frustrated and in pain. Penelope stepped up to manage the ranch in his absence, working with Jack, Sam, and Miguel to keep everything running smoothly. She consulted with August on major decisions, but handled the day-to-day operations herself, proving she was just as capable a rancher as she was a homemaker. August watched her work with a mixture of pride and amazement. "I should have known," he said one evening as she reported on the day's activities. "You could run this place with your eyes closed." "I learned from the best," she said, adjusting his pillows. "And we're partners, August. When you're down, I pick up the slack. When I'm down, you do the same. That's how this works." His leg healed slowly but completely, and by spring he was back to full strength. But something had shifted. He began including Penelope in all ranch decisions, not just as a courtesy but as a genuine partner. They discussed purchases, sales, hiring decisions, and long-term planning together. The ranch became truly theirs, not just his with her help. In 1889, Jack announced his retirement. He was getting too old for the hard work of cowboying, he said, and wanted to spend his remaining years in town, playing cards and telling stories. August threw him a party and gave him a generous retirement package, enough to live comfortably for the rest of his days. They promoted Miguel to foreman and hired 2 new hands, younger men eager to learn. Sam stayed on, now the senior cowboy, respected and relied upon. The ranch continued to thrive under their collective care. Samuel grew into a tall, serious boy with his father's work ethic and his mother's sharp mind. He excelled at school when he attended in the winter months, and he worked hard on the ranch during the busy seasons. Rose was a whirlwind of energy and opinions, keeping everyone on their toes with her quick wit and quicker temper. In 1891, Penelope was surprised to find herself pregnant again at 34. She hadn't expected to have more children, but August was delighted. This pregnancy was harder than the others, her body older and less resilient. But in the spring of 1892, she delivered a healthy baby boy they named Thomas, after her first husband. August had suggested the name himself. "He was part of your life, part of what shaped you," he said. "I'm not threatened by honoring his memory." It was a gesture of such generosity and understanding that Penelope wept. Thomas Quinlan was a quiet baby, content and peaceful, the opposite of his spirited older siblings. August doted on him, carrying him around in a sling while he worked. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. Samuel turned 16 in 1895, a young man now, talking about his future. He wanted to stay on the ranch, to eventually take it over when August was ready to step back. August couldn't have been more pleased. Rose, at 13, was becoming a beautiful young woman, much to August's dismay. He had been right about needing to beat the boys away. Penelope found it amusing, the way August glowered at any young man who looked at Rose too long. Thomas, at 3, was everyone's darling, sweet-natured and affectionate. One day in the summer of 1896, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Penelope was in the garden when she saw him approaching, and something about him seemed familiar. As he drew closer, she gasped, "Charles." She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. The man dismounted, smiling. "Hello, Penelope." It was her younger brother, whom she hadn't seen in nearly 20 years. They had lost touch after she moved west, letters growing fewer and then stopping altogether. He looked older, worn by time and weather, but his smile was the same. "What are you doing here?" she asked, torn between joy and uncertainty. "I've been looking for you for months," Charles said. "I'm heading to California, trying to start over after some bad years. I wanted to see you before I went, make sure you were all right." "I'm more than all right," she assured him. "Come, meet my family." August was in the barn and came out when he heard the commotion. Penelope introduced them, and August shook Charles's hand warmly, insisting he stay for supper and the night at least over the meal. Charles told his story. He had tried farming in Missouri, but floods and bad luck had ruined him. He had lost his wife to fever 2 years prior and had no children. He was heading west to try mining or ranching or whatever opportunity he could find. "Stay here," August said suddenly. "We could use another hand and your family." Charles looked startled. "I couldn't impose like that." "It's not an imposition," Penelope said, looking at August with love. "We have room, we have work, and you're my brother. Please stay, at least for a while." Charles stayed. He proved to be a hard worker, grateful for the opportunity. He bonded quickly with Samuel, teaching him skills August didn't have. He was kind to Rose and endlessly patient with young Thomas. Within months, it felt like he had always been part of the ranch. In 1898, when Samuel was 19, he met a young woman at a dance in San Elizario. Her name was Clara, and she was the daughter of a shopkeeper. Samuel was smitten immediately, and after a proper courtship, they married in the spring of 1899. August gave them a portion of land on the ranch to build their own house, helping Samuel construct a small but sturdy home. Penelope welcomed Clara into the family, teaching her what she needed to know about ranch life. Rose, at 17, was being courted by a young lawyer from El Paso. August was deeply suspicious of any man who worked with his mind instead of his hands, but Penelope reminded him that Rose needed to make her own choices. Life continued its steady march forward. In 1901, Samuel and Clara welcomed August and Penelope's first grandchild, a little girl named Emma. August was besotted instantly, carrying Emma around and spoiling her shamelessly. "You're going to ruin her," Penelope laughed, watching him sneak Emma a piece of candy before dinner. "That's what grandparents are for," he replied, unrepentant. Thomas, now 9, was thriving. He was different from Samuel, more interested in books and learning than in ranch work. But August supported his interests fully, buying him books and encouraging his education. In 1903, Rose married her lawyer, a man named James Hartford. The wedding was held at the ranch, a beautiful celebration that drew people from all over the county. August walked Rose down the aisle with tears in his eyes, and Penelope cried happily throughout the ceremony. Rose and James settled in El Paso, where James had his practice, but they visited regularly. Rose had inherited her mother's strength and her father's kindness, and she and James were clearly deeply in love. As the new century progressed, the Quinlan Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. August and Penelope were respected members of the community, known for their fairness and generosity. They employed several families, supported the local church, and helped their neighbors in times of need. In 1907, August turned 55 and Penelope turned 50. They celebrated quietly, marveling at how quickly time had passed. Samuel was now running much of the day-to-day operations of the ranch, having proved himself more than capable. Clara had given them 3 grandchildren, Emma, now 6, and twin boys born in 1904. Rose and James had one son, born in 1905, whom they named August after his grandfather. Thomas, at 15, had announced his intention to become a teacher, wanting to work with children. August supported the decision fully, proud of his youngest son's compassion and intelligence. Charles, now in his 60s, had become indispensable to the ranch and to the family. He had never remarried, content with his role as uncle and general helper. He and August had become close friends over the years, spending evenings playing chess and discussing everything from politics to philosophy. One evening in the fall of 1910, Penelope and August sat together on the porch swing they had installed years earlier. The sunset was spectacular, the sky ablaze with color. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, supervised by Samuel and Clara. Rose was visiting with her family, and the house was full of laughter and life. "You remember that first night?" August asked, his arm around Penelope's shoulders. "When we got married and came back here." "I remember thinking I had made a terrible mistake," Penelope admitted. "I thought I was trading one kind of prison for another. And now I know it was the best decision I ever made." She turned to look at him. They were both older now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the passage of time. But his eyes were still the same winter green, still looking at her with love and devotion. "You gave me everything, August. You gave me freedom, security, love, a family. You gave me a life I couldn't have imagined. You gave me just as much," he said. "You made this house a home. You gave me children and grandchildren. You made me happier than I ever thought possible. When you asked me to marry you, I thought there would be strings attached, conditions, expectations I would have to meet. And instead, you handed me the deed to your heart and walked away, letting me choose you freely. That was the greatest gift you could have given me." August kissed her softly, and she melted into it, still affected by him after more than 30 years together. When they pulled apart, Samuel was approaching, Emma riding on his shoulders. "Mama, Papa," he called. "Emma wants to hear the story of how you met. Will you tell it?" Penelope and August exchanged a glance, smiling. They had told the story many times over the years, to their children and grandchildren, each time marveling at how far they had come from that desperate beginning. "Come sit," Penelope said, gesturing to the porch steps. "I'll tell you." The family gathered around as twilight deepened into night. Penelope told the story of the foreclosure notice, the impossible situation, and the stranger who had offered her a way out. She told of the practical arrangement, the slow building of trust, and the night during the storm when everything changed. "So you married grandfather out of necessity?" Emma asked, her young face serious. "I did," Penelope confirmed, "but I stayed married to him out of love, the greatest love I've ever known." August squeezed her hand and she squeezed back. Around them, their family listened and laughed and asked questions. This was their legacy. Not just the ranch, not just the land and cattle and buildings, but the love that had built it all. The love that had started as a desperate gamble and had grown into something unshakable. As the stars came out one by one, filling the vast Texas sky, Penelope looked around at her family and felt a profound sense of contentment. She had been so lost once, so desperate and alone. August had offered her a lifeline, asking for nothing in return, and in doing so had given her everything. She had expected strings and conditions. He had handed her the deed and walked away, trusting her to choose him. And she had chosen him, every day for more than 3 decades. She would continue to choose him for however many days they had left. That was the real story, she thought. Not the desperation or the practical arrangement, but the choice to love, the decision to build something beautiful from broken pieces. That was what she wanted her grandchildren to remember. That love could come from unexpected places, that second chances were real, and that the best things in life were often the ones you didn't plan for. August looked over at her, his eyes still full of wonder after all these years. "What are you thinking about?" "About how lucky I am," she said simply. "About how grateful I am that you walked into my life when you did." "I'm the lucky one," he insisted, as he always did. "We're both lucky," she compromised, leaning her head on his shoulder as their family talked and laughed around them. The night deepened, and eventually the gathering broke up. Samuel took his tired children home. Rose and James retired to the guest room. Thomas went to his room to read. Charles headed to the small cottage they had built for him years ago. Finally, it was just Penelope and August again, standing together in the quiet house. August locked the doors and banked the fire while Penelope tidied up from the evening. They walked to their bedroom hand in hand, a habit formed over decades. As they prepared for bed, moving around each other with the ease of long practice, Penelope felt a surge of emotion. "August," she said. He turned to look at her. "Yes, thank you for everything. For the life you've given me, for loving me so completely, for being exactly the man you are." He crossed to her and took her hands. "Penelope Quinlan, you have been the joy of my life. Every day with you has been a gift. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They climbed into bed, and August pulled her close, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist. This was how they always slept, fitted together perfectly. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, always will." Penelope closed her eyes, surrounded by warmth and love and the certainty of being exactly where she belonged. Outside, the Texas night was vast and wild, full of possibilities and dangers. But inside this house, in this bed, in this man's arms, she was safe. She was loved. She was home. The years continued to unfold gently for the Quinlan family. By 1915, Samuel and Clara had 5 children, and Rose and James had 3. The ranch had expanded to become one of the largest in the area, employing dozens of families and contributing significantly to the local economy. Thomas had become a respected teacher in El Paso, beloved by his students and known for his patience and wisdom. August and Penelope, now in their late 60s, had stepped back from the daily running of the ranch, though they remained active and engaged. August still rode out most mornings to check on things, and Penelope still managed the household and organized the social aspects of ranch life. They were grandparents to 8 children, with another on the way, and they reveled in the role. The world around them was changing rapidly. Automobiles were becoming more common. Electricity was making its way even to rural areas, and the talk was all of modern conveniences and new technologies. But on the Quinlan ranch, the rhythms remained largely the same. The cycle of seasons, the care of animals, the work of the land. In the spring of 1918, Charles passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 73. His death was mourned by the entire family and community. He had never remarried, never had children of his own, but he had been a beloved uncle and friend to everyone who knew him. They buried him on the ranch, in a plot overlooking the land he had helped tend for more than 20 years. "He was a good man," August said at the funeral, his voice thick with emotion. "He worked hard, loved deeply, and left this world better than he found it. That's all any of us can hope for." Penelope wept for her brother, grateful that they had been reunited, that he had spent his final years surrounded by family and love. August held her through her grief, as he always had, steady and strong. The 1920s brought new challenges and new joys. The grandchildren were growing up, some of them showing interest in staying on the ranch, others looking toward different futures. August and Penelope supported them all, encouraging each child to follow their own path. In 1923, Penelope took ill with a fever that wouldn't break. For days, she drifted in and out of consciousness while August sat by her bedside, refusing to leave. The doctor came from town, prescribed what medicines he could, and warned the family to prepare for the worst. But Penelope was tougher than the illness. Slowly, gradually, she recovered, though it left her weaker than before. August was shaken by how close he had come to losing her. "You're not allowed to die before me," he told her one evening as she recovered, trying to make a joke but failing to hide his fear. "I'll do my best," she promised, taking his hand. "But August, if something does happen to me, you have to promise me you'll be all right. You have Samuel and Rose and Thomas. You have the grandchildren. You'll be surrounded by love." "I don't want to think about it," he said roughly. "We're both getting older. We have to think about these things. Then we'll go together," he said stubbornly. "I'm not living in a world without you in it," she smiled, touched by his devotion even as she recognized the impossibility of his wish. "We'll have whatever time we're given, and we'll be grateful for it." Penelope's recovery was slow but complete. By summer, she was back to her normal activities, though perhaps moving a bit slower than before. August hovered, protective and worried, until she finally told him to stop fussing or she'd hit him with a frying pan. Their 60th wedding anniversary fell in 1938. By then, August was 86 and Penelope was 81. They had been married longer than many of their grandchildren had been alive. The family organized a massive celebration, bringing together relatives and friends from across Texas and beyond. The party was held at the ranch on a beautiful October day. Long tables were set up in the yard, laden with food. A band played music and people danced and laughed and celebrated. August and Penelope sat in places of honor, watching it all with wonder and joy. Samuel, now 59 and running the ranch with his own adult sons, stood up to make a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who showed us all what real love looks like, who built this ranch and this family with their own hands and hearts, who gave us the greatest gift, the example of a marriage built on respect, partnership, and genuine affection. May they have many more years together." Everyone cheered and drank. Rose spoke next, tears streaming down her face as she talked about growing up with parents who clearly adored each other. Thomas spoke about the values they had instilled: hard work, kindness, integrity, love. Finally, August stood, helping Penelope to her feet beside him. "I'm going to tell you all a secret," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. "When I asked Penelope to marry me 60 years ago, I told her it was a business arrangement. I told her I needed help around the house and she needed financial security. I made it sound practical and cold." Penelope smiled up at him, knowing where this was going. "But the truth is," August continued, "I was already in love with her. I had been since the first time I saw her. I knew if I told her that, she'd refuse out of loyalty to her late husband's memory, so I lied. I offered her a practical arrangement, hoping that someday she might come to care for me too." "And did she?" someone in the crowd called out. "She did," August said, looking down at Penelope with undisguised adoration. "She gave me everything I ever wanted and things I didn't even know to dream of. She gave me a home, a family, a life worth living. She gave me 60 years of joy. And if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't change a single moment." Penelope reached up and cupped his weathered face in her equally weathered hands. "I love you, August Quinlan. I have loved you for 60 years, and I'll love you for whatever time we have left." They kissed, and the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. The celebration continued long into the evening, with stories and laughter and music filling the air. As the sun set on that perfect day, August and Penelope slipped away from the crowd, walking slowly to a spot on the ranch they had always loved. A small rise that overlooked the entire property. From here, they could see the house, the barns, the corrals, the grazing cattle, the fields. They could see everything they had built together. "It's been a good life," Penelope said softly. "The best," August agreed, his arm around her waist, supporting her as they stood together. "I have no regrets, Penelope, none at all. Neither do I." They stood in silence, watching the colors change in the sky, feeling the cool evening breeze, surrounded by the sounds of their family celebrating below. They were old now, their bodies worn by time and work. But their love was as strong as ever, burnished by decades of partnership and devotion. August Quinlan lived to be 91 years old. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1943, with Penelope holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you," spoken to the woman who had been his wife for 65 years. Penelope mourned him deeply, but didn't break. She remained on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about August, keeping his memory alive for the younger generations who hadn't known him as well. She lived another 5 years, passing away in 1948 at the age of 91. Her family gathered around her bed as she took her final breaths. Her last words were about August, wondering aloud if he was waiting for her. They buried her beside him in the small family cemetery on the ranch, beneath a tree they had planted together 50 years earlier. The headstones were simple, bearing their names, dates, and a single line August had requested years before. "Together forever." The ranch continued under Samuel's care, then passed to his sons and then to their sons. The Quinlan family remained on the land that August and Penelope had built together, each generation adding to the legacy while honoring the foundation. The story of how August and Penelope met became family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. It was a story about desperation and hope, about practical arrangements that became profound love, about choosing each other every single day, because in the end, that was what their story was really about, choice. Penelope could have refused August's proposal. She could have left at any time after when he told her she was free to go, but she chose to stay. She chose to love him. She chose to build a life with him. And August, who had offered her freedom and security with no strings attached, who had handed her the deed to his heart and walked away, giving her the power to accept or reject him, had made his own choice every day. To love her, to honor her, to cherish her until his last breath. Their love story wasn't conventional. It didn't start with romance or passion. It started with necessity and practicality and a business arrangement. But it became something extraordinary, something that lasted a lifetime and beyond, something that shaped not just 2 lives but generations of lives that followed. In San Elizario, Texas, and the surrounding area, the Quinlan name became synonymous with integrity, hard work, and lasting love. When people spoke of August and Penelope, it was always with reverence and affection. They had been pillars of the community, examples of what a marriage could be when built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. The ranch itself became a landmark, a testament to what 2 people could accomplish when they worked together toward a common goal. The original house still stood, added onto and modified over the years, but recognizably, the same structure August had brought Penelope to on their wedding day. And if you visited the family cemetery on a quiet day, you might stand before those two simple headstones and reflect on the remarkable story they represented. A story of a woman who had lost everything and a man who had offered her a way forward. A story of practical arrangements that became profound devotion. A story of two people who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful that would outlast them both. She had expected strings and conditions, obligations and demands. He had handed her the deed and walked away, trusting her to choose freely. And in that choice, in that mutual respect and growing affection, they had found something rare and precious. A love that endured, that strengthened rather than weakened with time, that provided the foundation for a family and a legacy that would continue for generations. That was the story of August and Penelope Quinlan. A love story set in the Wild West, in a time and place where survival was hard and romance was often a luxury. But they had found both, had built both, had lived both. And their story, passed down through the years, continued to inspire everyone who heard it. In the end, that's all any of us can hope for. To love and be loved, to build something meaningful, to leave the world a little better than we found it. August and Penelope did all of that and more. They lived fully, loved deeply, and created a legacy that would never be forgotten. And somewhere, perhaps, in whatever comes after this life, they were together still, their hands entwined, their hearts as joined in death as they had been in life. Together forever, just as they had promised. Just as it should be, just as it was always meant to be.